All right, so we're talking about working with your first ever session or with your first ever couple. Where would you like to start?
Mostly with just looking at the 30-30-30 divide. Obviously we talked previously about letting them make the decision of who goes in the room first. One of the things that I saw in the notes was concerns around like one of the partners like levels of potential jealousy. So maybe just thoughts around that just to begin with.
Yeah, so I said that as a general, but I don't disagree with you in that based on that, it would be good to get him in there first, right? So that he's comfortable and not sitting in the waiting room, you know, oh, what's going on with them in the room, yeah. Right? Like putting his ear into the door kind of thing. So another way around it too, so you can get maybe best of both worlds. You get them in together, you go over the consent form with both of them there together, and he gets to kind of feel your vibe and everything. You, beyond just talking about the consent form, one thing I do comment on for couples versus individuals is when the two of you do break up into the individual components, there's confidentiality there as well. So just so that you guys know, even what you share in that individual portion remains confidential, unless of course you don't want it to, but then that's your choice. And then of course, at the end of that, I ask, was there anything that you shared today that you're not comfortable with us talking about right away with your partner in the room? And then that way you can honor that and you can talk about it if it does come up that there is something that they don't want their partner to know, and how to tackle that at that point. Then once you do that and you're done the consent form, they sign it, then you can give them that option. So that's why I think it's best of both worlds, because I think even just a couple of minutes with all three of you there in the room will at least somewhat combat that fear of jealousy and that kind of thing. And yeah, the other thing you can relay is your goal, right? Your goal as the therapist is to work on their relationship, right? The client is not either of them individually and their relationship with themselves, or your relationship with either of them individually. It's really, really about your relationship with their relationship in a sense, right? That's what you're looking to work on. And that's your only goal is to improve that and to meet the combined goals that both of them have for the relationship. Yeah. That's your role, right? That's what you're there to help tweak, to help improve, right? To help shape. These are the things that you're there for, and that this one-off individual meeting is there to give you that space to be able to talk about whatever is going on for you, where you have that space to give me your side of things, not your side, me versus the other person, but your side of like what you see is going well, what you see is maybe troubling, what you see is like how you see the dynamic, right? How you see you know, this getting better, right? What your individual goals are for individual or for couples counseling. That's what that individual part. But then once that's done, almost always we will from the next kind of from the time we're there all together, we're not going to be meeting individually. So it's like this one-time thing, right? And I think that's a really good selling point in a sense, because this is their one and only chance to be able to meet with you individually before working the three of you together in that sort of triad.
And so looking at the individual meetings, just trying to like get as much information as I can as like their perspective on things, what's going well, what's going wrong, how they're seeing the relationship through their eyes, and then probably good as well to maybe get goals down for both of them. And I think there'd be some information as well too, considering if their goals were completely different. I think that would tell you something too. So exactly, yeah. Okay. So we have that individual or the couples questionnaire that you can go through if you want. You can use that as a starting point. It's not there to be, you know, hard and fast questions that you have to get the answer, you know, to for every single question. It's more an outline. Like some people, almost all of them feel like all the questions are relevant.
So they'll answer all of them, but some will answer them very quickly and very kind of 1, 2, 3, 4 word answers, and others really want to expand on them. And so there may not be enough time for all the questions for people that have a lot to say, but that's okay, because with what they're saying, you're getting a lot of information as well that's important to them. They're saying it because it's relevant to them.
Yeah. Another question I had too was just around note structure. Obviously, I've only ever done individual sessions before, and I'm finding notes very easy. Well, not very easy. I've just found my own style and how to do it. One of the things that I'm already anticipating that I'll do is be trying to scribble down as much detail as possible. What do you recommend in terms of notes? Like how much to take, like just keeping it as general as possible. Like I know I'll get caught up in the details, so I'm going to try to avoid that, but just was wanting your thoughts on that as well.
So imagine you're in a relationship and you're seeing a couples counselor. What would you want them to be doing as far as notes?
I would want them more to be listening as opposed to scribbling in their notebook the entire time, which is why I'm asking.
There's your answer.
Yeah.
You have the answer, right? Like,
yeah.
Whether you can help them or not has very little to do with what you're writing down.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So you would write in my mind, the minimum amount of notes that will allow you to get whatever you need from the notes. But the notes aren't really for them, right? The notes are more for you.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, different people might have a different minimum amount for that, right? I used to write a lot more in the beginning, and I write very, very little now in my couples. I honestly sometimes will write 2 words for one person and 2 words for the other.
Yeah.
As little as that, right?
Yeah.
For a first session. I do like to ask if they received any insight. So this is like the second session going forward. Hey, when you left the room last week, what was that like? What was the experience like right after? And then during the week, or since last time, were there any insights? Were you able to kind of integrate anything we talked about? Did you notice that you benefited from anything? So the purpose of that question is, were there any revelations? Were there anything that you really took from last session that you tried to implement, right? So it's all on the good side, right? And then if there was, then I'll ask them, like, what did you notice your partner doing as well to help with that? Like sometimes they're reporting like, yeah, the week went really well, this and this and this changed. Okay, now I want them to give some credit to their partner. Like, what did you attribute the change to be? Is it just what we did in the session? Is it something that you took from the session and then try to implement? Is it something your partner did? Like, what did you notice them doing differently, right? So it's like a lot of that. So before we get into issues, second session, of course, onwards, you're not going to be doing this in the first session. And then we get into, okay, so this was your experience over the week, this was yours. Now let's get into and if they do present something negative, I go, okay, let me get the positives, and then I'll note some of the negatives that we can actually use in a few minutes once we're done with some of the insights. I actually don't like to use the word positive and negative. I like to kind of go insights and then challenges.
Okay.
Yeah. And then, then you'll after the consent form, you'll break into your individual parts. Whenever you're close to the 30-minute mark, I would just say, okay, look, if you do feel like they have a lot more to say, you can give them the option of going, hey, look, like it looks like there's a lot to say here. Are you wanting to have this individual component be longer? And then instead of doing 30, 30, 30 today, we could do 45, 45. In which in that case, you'll go out of the room and just say, hey, there was a lot to talk about. Are you okay if you both have more time today?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you let, him or her, whoever's starting, go up until the 45.
And so then that's essentially like 2 individual sessions,
right?
And then the next one would be a full couple
exactly.
session. Okay. All right.
Sometimes this occurs when there is a safety concern. Then I'll purposefully just do that, because then you may want time to think about how to approach the first real couple session.
Yeah.
And you'll just end up doing 45 anyways.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. Whether it's a concern issue, any kind of what we call contraindicators for that make a situation more complex. So in EFT and the research, some of the contraindicators are that, like safety concerns, of course. And safety concern, just so you know, it's not like a one-off, like a physical fight or something like that. Safety concern, Gottman has a really good definition. He's even got terms for it, but it's the difference between essentially like with murder, like a premeditated, this is what happens on a continual basis, versus this person was triggered and in the moment they snapped. So that's different. The first we can't really work with, because it's like the psychopath, the narcissist kind of thing. Actually, I've worked with a bunch of narcissists too, so I wouldn't say it's not possible, but it's more difficult. But still, that's a good time to do the 45-45, so that you have time to digest, and that you have more time to, if you're starting with, let's say, the female partner and the concerns with the male partner, you have more time to spend with the male to see, hey, is this just the way she sees it, or is there and it's not necessarily true, like he has a very different experience, or is it true, and like now you actually have more time to investigate around what it really looks like.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and then you might put the questionnaire aside and just kind of go into more investigative mode.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Another
By
thing
the way, that's like extremely rare, just so you know.
Yeah.
Narcissists don't usually come to couples counseling. Psychopaths don't usually come to couples counseling, right?
Well, knowing my luck, it'll happen to me.
I don't think so. I think that the fact that she mentioned jealousy speaks to the fact that it's a trigger.
Yeah.
People get jealous because they care and because they have insecurities around that. They don't get jealous because of a premeditated, I want to get jealous, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So once we move into like the actual, so the individual stuff I'm already comfortable with, like I don't have I can already envision like what I'll do with each of them individually. It's the couples part that I start to like get a little bit panicky. So what would you say would be like a really good set of goals for like the first session? And I want to do this from the EFT modality as well. That would be like my goal, to try to follow that as closely as possible. I don't want to meander around and waste time and anything like that. So,
So a really good, easy-ish to help kind of calm your nerves first session of that 30 minutes, assuming you got the timing right, like 30, and you can sort of say how much time you have left. Let's say you did go a couple minutes or so, we got 20 minutes today. Let them know what they have to expect, right? And then you kind of are able to set the expectation for yourself as well. So one really easy thing to do would just be to go over both their goals. So here's what you mentioned, here's what you mentioned. And then summarize it, try to in your head, if you can just overlap the two, it makes it really easy, right? For example, male says, I want to be able to talk about my feelings and not be judged for them, let's just say.
Yeah.
And she says, I want us to be able to communicate and resolve fights without, with like really resolving them and not just sweeping it under the rug. Very compatible, right? So I would say those two sound like very compatible goals. Let's combine the language, or how does this sound to you guys? So, and almost in this case, maybe take hers or just add the word or whatever from his, but because they're compatible, and you do want the goal, the unifying goals to be we language, right? Not just I want to be able, like, this is what we both want to be able to, be able to share our feelings, end up feeling heard, end up with a resolution at the end of these interactions. That's a good goal, right? And be able to do that consistently. Okay, good. That's a good goal. And so you write down goal number 1, goal number 2. We want to have, sex 5 times a week, whatever it might be. So you write down all these goals, and when you're coming up with them individually, it's good to make them measurable and less abstract. So what often comes up is we want to improve our communication. So to that, I would say something like, so picture the perfect relationship, close your eyes for me. What does perfect communication look like? What's different compared to what it looks like right now? So I don't care so much about what it looks like right now. We're going to delve into that, but what do you want it to look like, right? How do you know what it is that we're doing here is done? Like, how do you know it's been achieved, this exact goal? So close your eyes and give me that. Like, what does it look like? And so then it becomes a little bit more operationalized, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, part of like the individual sessions, a lot of it is about our ability or to have them see that we're really able to hear their concerns. Like we want to create that initial like attachment between me and you, and then with him, with me and you. That needs to be really strong before we come in together, because the things you're going to ask them to do in the couples realm is going to be really hard for them, right? If it wasn't hard, they wouldn't be coming to see you. They'd be doing it already. So the things you're asking them to do is essentially overcoming their whole childhood. It's a pretty big task. It's a big leap of faith. So having that individual attachment's really, really key to that. The better your attachment with each of them is, the easier time they'll have to take these risks. And the two big risks in EFT are to express and to receive. And receiving is two components. Receiving is two things. So once I've expressed, when my partner responds to me in the way that I want them to respond to me, to be able to receive that, to really let that in. That's a risk for some people, because it's an opposite message than what they're expecting, and it's opposite of what they get every day, right? And that might be really hard to let in, even though it's what they want. And the other kind of receiving is around my partner now is expressing to me something, and it might be different than what I'm used to. And do I believe them or do I not believe them, right? And to receive them as they are is also a risk. Not for everyone, but for some people. For a lot of people, it's what they've always been wanting and they've been waiting for it. And it's amazing that their partner is able to do that now, right? So these are kind of three different kinds of risks. Oh, I don't know what happened with my camera.
I think your camera turned off.
I'm going to switch it off to my other camera. Let's see here. There you go. So my other camera died on me. It's okay. So those are the three big risks. So we've maybe spent 5 minutes, 10 minutes maybe on just kind of coming up with unified language for the goals. Now that doesn't leave you much time, right?
Yeah.
But that being said, it's really important. I've learned it's really important for me to have them walk away with an experience of EFT from the first session. And the reason for that is you're opening up some stuff in the individual sessions and the beginning of the couple, just even talking about goals. If, well, multiple reasons. First is couples have higher expectations than individuals do. There's two of them, they have very clear goals, right? They want to see something tangible happen compared to individuals. So expectations are generally on average higher. That's one reason you want to give them something to walk away with. Not just, okay, he listened to us, we talked about our goals, right? Especially if there's like high conflict and right? And with couples, right? Sometimes it's, so number two, there's a time limited aspect to it. If we're in crisis and we're not seeing you for another week, that's a gamble that you're giving them another week without that experience. And three, it's just nice to have an experience that's different than what they're normally used to. Because what it ultimately does is it creates this like world of possibilities of like what could our relationship be. If you're able to even take one little enactment in that first session, it creates all this hope for them. It doesn't matter who's the one enacting, because if I see my partner different, that already gives me hope. If I'm doing something different and I get a different result from my partner, it's like, holy shit, this person that I've been living with for 40 years just gave me something that they haven't been able to do for 40 years. That even a tiny little baby step, that creates this huge world of possibility for people. Yeah. So that's another reason. There's, I'm sure, 100 more, but those are the reasons why we want to do an enactment, that souvenir that they get to take home right from the get-go, right? So one of the easiest enactments to do is essentially just owning your experience, just owning your coping even, you can call it that. So you can get a situation from either of them. So you can start with a question of, tell me, so for either of you, do you have a recent memory of an interaction where one or both of you, and you don't have to take notes now because we're recording this, so if you want, feel free to watch it back. right? But so for either of you, do you have a particular situation, ideally something recent, but doesn't have to be, that, again, ideally encompasses a typical interaction that doesn't go well in your relationship, but again, doesn't have to, just something that stands in your mind as like heated, unresolved, an escalation, or simply, one or both of you just don't get your needs met from that interaction. So an example that could be, hey, honey, tell me about your day. And he goes, oh, I'm busy. And then the interaction ends there, but the needs for one person wasn't met because they were trying to accomplish something. So sometimes I call all of those under the one umbrella of an escalation, even though, of course, that's not really an escalation. But the reason I still keep the word escalation is because internally, there's an escalation going on, right? There's like a reinforcement that he doesn't love me. There's all these stories that keep going in circles. And so it's an escalation from that point of view. And it can feed the next interaction too. So that's why it's an escalation. But that's just an umbrella term I use. And so either of you have any one of these situations, just let me know if you think of one. Okay, perfect. You've got one. One of you has one. Good. Now, before you describe it, I just want you to keep this in mind, right? I want you to describe it from the standpoint of if there's a video camera in the room. So what would a video camera see or hear, right? It wouldn't hear, this is what it wouldn't hear. It wouldn't hear an interpretation of the other person's behavior. It wouldn't hear like a diagnosis of the other person. It wouldn't hear blame. It wouldn't hear any of these things. It would literally just see like A happened first, and then in response, I saw B and then A. It's like a Pong game. I just want to understand the Pong game. That's it.
Yeah.
Right. So that's like option one, is to have someone recite a recent experience, right? Option two for you as a first session is to ask them, now you coming in, I imagine you have some questions about what it is we're going to do here. Do either of you have any exposure to EFT? If the answer is no, or if the answer is yes, but I'd love to hear more about it, you could spend that time doing a little bit of psychoed for the first, for the 15 minutes or so. So that's okay. It's not my preference because, again, that like the points I mentioned earlier, but for some people that are anxious, understanding the process and understanding what to expect, that can be helpful for them to help calm them down.
Mm-hmm.
And then it gives them that week or whatever to be able to research EFT and brace themselves for the work they're about to do, because it's not easy work. So that's option two. If either one of them wants to learn about EFT, then you can describe it to them, like what they can expect, mostly stage one, like what is stage one, just like what's the first few sessions, what are they going to look like? So that's a good starting point. And you can spend if you've spent 5 minutes or 10 minutes on the goals, and you spent 10 minutes on that takes you to the end.
Yeah.
And then they'll have questions and you can answer their questions and that kind of thing, right? But ideally, most people will want the option number one, and then you would kind of go with that. Like it means just to dive in and to experience EFT, not necessarily to have it described to them.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anything come up for you about that? Either of those options?
Yeah. Well, I like option one. Absolutely. Because I think they're not there. I mean, like you said, I've had clients before in individual where psychoed can be helpful, mostly just to quell anxiety in terms of trying to figure out what we're going to do next or give them some structure. But I would think for a couple, if we're doing 30-30 and then they maybe have 30 minutes to be able to kind of work through at least even one incident, I would assume most people would want to go to that. And I like the idea of slowing down an interaction between the both of them. I like the video camera thing too, because it keeps it really, really objective. My one question with that would be, if you're finding one partner is naturally leading, providing more information, like who would you choose in terms of when you're deciding option one? I guess would be my next
Yeah,
question.
it's a good question. It's almost always the pursuer, which is okay, because the purpose of this is at first just information gathering. It's not that important to, and also the times when it's not the pursuer, it's the pursuer asking the withdrawer to go, hey, you describe it. So it's still
Yeah.
the pursuer leading. That's just inherent in the work, and that's fine. Um, and sometimes you can co-construct it like this. Okay, the one person brings up, okay, if this is how it happened, and then you go, oh, and then what happened? And you ask him, and then what happened? And then what? So it doesn't matter. Like however you do, it's okay, because the purpose of it is just to go to get, like, the first objective for you is, I just want a little bit of a map. I just want a little bit of a figure eight being here. So the EFT sort of like the first stage model or first level model is, okay, you've got this dotted line, right? It's like dotted line. You got a figure eight. A portion of the figure eight goes above the line and a portion goes below. And in the middle, you've got, withdrawer and then pursuer, right? Pursuer, withdrawer, you got this line. And the figure eight crosses it right in the middle, and it goes like that. And what's at the top is the behavior of this person. And then at the top on this side is the behavior of this person. So you're trying to draw this map in your head, and maybe you can write it down as well. And you could look up the EFT figure eight if you want, and that might help you a little bit. So, and I've got this book here that's good. That this is the new workbook. And you can get this later. I wouldn't start with it, but emotionally focused workbook. This is a second edition. I know it's kind of blurry, but
Yeah, it's a little blurry. That's okay though.
yeah. And so there's a lot of exercises there around the figure eight. And so essentially you're just trying to grab one moment in time that you can find an entry point into, right? And that takes you to the next phase. So entry point just means a trigger, right? You don't want, so this isn't an entry point. I was making breakfast and then I took the kids to school. That's not an entry point, right? There's no energy there. Yeah. An entry point is as soon as you hear something that provoked, that activated either person. That's an entry point, right? You don't have to go too far into it, and then this happened, and then this happened, and this is where the climax is. That's more for later sessions maybe, and you go into the deeper entry points, right? But you just need a moment in time. That's why it doesn't really matter who goes first, right? Because this is just kind of the story or the interactions. And what you're writing down in this figure eight is this person's behavior, okay? And the idea of a figure eight is it's infinite, right? But they get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, right? And that's the idea, right? Until there's like an explosion, or we both go our separate ways, or something big happens and it ends. Not necessarily. There's things that we calm down, we like revisit it, and then again came back. There's a lot of different permutations of that. But you've got this figure eight now, right? So an example could be, okay, I came home and he was sitting on the couch. Already you have your trigger, but that's okay. You keep going a little bit. And then I approached him and I said, like, why are you so lazy? And then he just shut down. He didn't say anything. And then I kept kind of badgering him. And I kept saying this, why can't you do anything with your life? Whatever it is. And then he jumps up and leaves and slams the door. Let's just say that, right? Okay, you've got a lot of triggering moments there, right? And you can then kind of leave it there and go, hey, in your mind now, who do you want to start with? Because in that first session, you'll only have time to go to one. So that's a decision you make. You can make that based off of who's more connected to their experience. Who do I feel is going to be able to become more primary, meaning get deep into their more raw, more vulnerable experience? Who do I have a stronger attachment to right now that I think I could help them, guide them to that primary place? There's no right answer, right? You could go random. It doesn't really matter, right? But the idea now is you're shifting from a systems model of trying to understand what happens next in their interactional cycle to now one of an experiential one, where the way I'll describe it sometimes is, hey, we're looking under the hood for both of you. Like, we're looking under the intrapersonal sort of aspect to Like, what was the part that was invisible to the other person, but that wasn't invisible to you? And maybe it's invisible to you too, right? And we're going to uncover that, right? Because it happens so fast. So it just seems like this is super automatic. So then you just decide in your head, hey, let's start with him, let's say in this particular scenario that I just kind of made up, right? So you're on the couch, right? Now and so now you can kind of, in your mind, you're going to go through the levels of the figure eight, right? Levels being other person's behavior, being the trigger, right? This is what they said, how they said it, the words they used, the tone, the nonverbal, how they pursued you, the gestures. It could be any of these things, but that's the behavior. Then you're looking at internally now, what's the interpretation from her behavior? That's like the top level. What are your perceptions about that, right? So as an example, maybe you are perceiving her behavior as she's attacking me, or she's angry at me, or she's unhappy with me, any of these three, let's say. So you take that now, you take that belief. It's not what she's saying. She's saying you're lazy, blah, blah. But
And
the
would you
experience,
be throwing that out to the client as you were doing this, or would you be letting like them tell you?
well, I would ask
Getting,
them, like,
you're getting it from them,
what's the belief? What's the interpretation of her behavior? How do you perceive that? Yeah. So you'd be asking them, right?
Yeah.
It's
Okay.
you're not going to make it up, right? So it's definitely going to come from them. So you've got this, I'm just giving you the example, right? So I've presented this behavior. He's given me, I perceive it as an attack, let's say, right? She's attacking me. So now we're into his perception. Now, when you think to yourself, your partner's attacking you, and then I might look at her and say, I'm not saying that's what you're doing, right? This is his perception. If I notice anything going on for her, I always want to keep that peripheral attention there. Even with online, you just kind of want to still look at how are they receiving. This is kind of where there could be a trigger. If there's a trigger, you do want to manage it, because they could interrupt, and that's one thing, but they won't be able to be present for the enactment if they are triggered themselves. So you do want to manage it, even if they're not saying anything. You kind of want to sometimes preemptively, especially for a first session, you don't know how they're going to receive it, right? So again, an example of that might be, hey, we're just going to stay with him for a moment. Let me know if this is hard for you to hear. Like, it's important to talk about that too. If you do notice something, like I said, I'm not saying this is the fact. This is just how he's perceiving it in that moment, right? So then we go back to him. What do you think to yourself when you think your partner of, you can make it more powerful, your partner of 10 years is attacking you, right? Slow down with your tone. And then you get the perception. Maybe he says, it's really hard, or I think to myself, how could she do that? Or I think to myself, oh my goodness, or here we go again. Whatever it is, it's okay, right? As long as it's within the frame of this is what you think to yourself. Because sometimes a response will be, I just want to run away. That's not so much the perception. That's now you're responding to the perception and the experience.
Yeah.
It's what you're wanting to do. That's your behavior. So then again, you bring it back. You might even tell them that. So that's what you want to do. You want to run away. But what are you thinking to yourself?
Yeah.
You're seeing that she's attacking you. What do you think to yourself? You just kind of bring it back to that, right? And then he might say, I'm failing her. Like, it depends on how vulnerable he's able to get.
Yeah.
But let's just say, I feel like a failure. Okay, let's just say that's what you tell yourself. Okay. So now when you think to yourself, I always reframe it back, because we're talking about perceptions. When you think to yourself, when you tell yourself you're a failure, what's that like? And now we're bringing it into the primary. Now we're under the dotted line.
Yeah.
That question's going to take us under. But part of it is also how you ask it, right? There's an acronym in EFT. It's called RISC, but it's RISSSC. Don't ask me to tell you what each of those are. I think I do. I like R is reflection. I is like use imagery, right? S is for like soft, like your tone. So these are the things that are going to help you get them down. So I know the last one, C, is concise. Like make it really concise. Don't make it really long.
Yeah.
Right? And you're, so soft, simple. I forget the last S, but it's the idea is bringing yourself to a very like raw emotional place, and then them along for the ride essentially. But you're inviting them in essence to drop down. So the response to that question will be their ideally their primary experience.
Yeah.
Right. But that's ideal. Sometimes resistance comes up for people. So your job is to go, is this resistance or is this their primary feeling?
Yeah.
So anything other than the primary is a form of resistance. And so again, you want to bring it back to the primary. Label what it is that they're doing, and then bring it back to the primary. So resistance example can be, so in response to what is that like for you? Oh, it doesn't bother me, right? Or so that I might say that. So your partner of 15 years, you're perceiving an attack, and that doesn't bother you. So that's all I have to say. That's it. I kind of challenge it a little bit. So another thing you can do if there's resistance, you can bring yourself into it. Hey, if it was my partner of this many years, and I could see how important she is to you, and I felt attack, a lot of stuff would be happening for me.
Even you can give them like a roadmap a little bit if they're unable to kind of fill the blanks in themselves. Give them some, like, would you say maybe a few options?
I see it more, instead of a roadmap, I see it as permission. I think, as a man, there might be conditioning around not allowed to be talking about this, whether from family or for culture or whatever else. So by me allowing myself to drop down, I'm kind of giving them permission to do the same. Right? That's why I don't want to give them options. I want to more give them this is what it will be like for me.
Your own experience.
Yeah. Right. And if you do so vulnerably, it often does work. It works really well. It's sometimes just them seeing you do it, whatever it is you're sharing, it makes them start to cry, right? So I wouldn't use that as a first resort, but that can be in your back pocket, so to speak.
Okay.
So that's that. So, but resistance in general, the idea is you acknowledge it and you come back, because even if you get lost in it, that's okay, as long as you come back. This is the kind of thing you might want to write down. So you might want to write down that thought of like, I'm failing her, or that anchor to the primary.
Anything
that perception
below that line. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, the perception's above the line, but it's what you end up going, oh, there's definitely emotion there.
Yeah.
It's the thing, if there is resistance, you can always come back to it. You can come back to like another example, like, oh, here we go again. Like, so they go distract from like, what's that like to think, oh, here we go again. And they go off to some other topic. And then you go, oh, remember, here we go again. That sounded really heavy for me, or that there's something there. Can we go back to that? What's that like when you think to yourself? Yeah. And one thing that's really key, so people will be in their head. So they'll be in the past and the future and all these other places other than here. But emotions are experienced in the here and now, right? So you bring it to the now. So this happened last week, but how is it like right here and right now to think to yourself, here we go again? Yeah. What comes up? See the difference?
Yeah.
Him trying to think about last week versus you're bringing it up to the surface. The thoughts are always there in different moments, but right here, right now, what's that like to think? You see her attacking you, and you think to yourself, oh my God, here we go again. You can add a word or two and that kind of thing, and that helps. Add the energy. And so then once you get to see them inhabiting that, whether he goes, so let's say the ideal situation, you go, here we go again. What's that like? Oh man, it's like I could feel it in my stomach, or like, oh, my heartbeat goes up, or it's like, you go, oh, it's like really overwhelming, isn't it? Yeah, it's really, that's it. That's all you need. So EFT is about catching the emotion, emotionally focused. Anytime we hit new emotional information, we go, hey, what would that be like right now to look at your partner, to turn to her and to share that with her, right? Because you've hit new emotional information. That's all you need. You don't need to stay there too long.
Yeah.
Right? If you can see it, that's all you need to say. If you're like, oh, like, are you connected to that right now? And they go, oh, yeah, maybe 2 out of 10, 3. Can you make space for that? Can you really connect with that? Just
Yeah.
get them to feel it a little bit more.
Yeah.
And then can you feel it now? Yeah, I could feel it like 5, not maybe as much as in the moment. That's okay. 5 out of 10. That's still a lot, right? Considering this is our first time, that's how much you're able to let yourself feel. That's amazing. And then you go, now the fact that you can feel it in this moment, can you turn to her? Can you look at her? Look at her for a second. What would that be like to actually just share that sense of being overwhelmed or whatever he just shared with you? And then they might say, that's really scary. Okay. What are you afraid of? What do you think will happen? She will criticize me. Okay. What would that be like to share instead? The fear. I'm afraid of sharing this piece with you because I worry that you will criticize me. And you can reflect that back. And what would that be like to do instead? Oh, yeah, maybe I can do that. That seems a little easier, right? So can you turn to her and just share that with her? And then he does it, right? That's the enactment, right? And often in the first session, either that will be the share, the fear of sharing, or if you couldn't get there, you can own what he does in this particular example, own what he does when he gets overwhelmed. Meaning, like he said, I just shut down, or I run away, or I defend myself. Own one of these pieces. So what it can look like when you share, it might look like, so when you come at me, or when make it specific, and especially in the beginning, not when you come at me. Last week, when you said those things, when you came at me in that way, like this will reduce the likelihood of being triggered. So when you frame it to him, make it very specific, like give him the words, like package it up, encapsulate it like this. So make it specific. So last week, when you said, you are lazy to me, and then I took that to mean that, that you are unhappy with me, whatever you end up uncovering, right? You're unhappy with me. When I think you're unhappy with me, I start to think that I'm a failure, and that's really overwhelming. So what I do with that, actually, that would be pretty vulnerable. Let's just say when I hear that, it makes me want to run away. And so that's what I did in that moment. I pushed away and I went upstairs and slammed the door, whatever. So see the difference between, so ideally you go to the vulnerable, but if you aren't able to make it there, if you aren't able to make it to the vulnerable part, just own the coping. Own that I defended myself, own that I shut down and I can't talk, or I need to run away. Yeah, so those are the 3. And then you essentially just process, what was that like for you to say, to do? What was that like for you to hear? If she gets a good response, turn to him, share that back. When you share that way, when you share your fear of talking, that's horrible. I want you to be able to share with me. I want you to feel safe. I want to just do anything I can to reassure you that won't happen. Oh, wow. Now, what was that like to hear, to the expressor? And he goes, oh, wow, I thought she was going to criticize me, and instead she did this. That feels really good. That brings my fear down. And then, wow, just validate, here's what we did today, right? And then go, this is EFT, guys. This is the beginning of our journey. And there's no homework today, but in the future, maybe we'll look at some things you can do outside of the session. But I just want you to sit with this and think about what we did today.
Okay.
That is
a wonderful starting point. I am much more comfortable than I was 45 minutes ago.
Wonderful. Yeah, watch this back, and I'll send
I
it to you
will.
later today. And
Yeah, I will.
think,
And we'll see each other probably next week again.
yeah,
Another thing I was going to ask them to, or ask you as well, if we did, like if I did the tape with them, should I be asking them to do that? I would think then we can go through that.
well, that's ideal. Yeah, definitely. If they're open to it. Yeah. If not, that's
Okay.
okay too.
All right. Okay. Thanks, Ofir.
You too. All right. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.